Hello again, Keith Bond here from Bond Christian Counseling. So in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about the process of reconciliation for forgiveness and specifically with the case of infidelity. And so this first part of the material comes from an author named Dave Carter from a book called Torn Asunder, which also comes with a workbook that I would recommend for any couple that is experiencing and trying to reconcile through infidelity. And so the first thing that Dave talks about is that to come into an understanding about there is a gradual deterioration of the marriage, that both parties have contributed to the place we find ourselves in this case of infidelity. And so, yes, the cheater did the actual breaking of the vows, but if you really dig into it, there's going to be a lot of vow breaking that has built up to this event. So I want to show you a graph here of something that he describes, which I don't remember X or Y. So this axis, I'll call it X, I could be wrong, is the intensity level. And then this axis is Y, about time. And so I'm going to say this chart, this graph is the infidel's experience of intensity. And by the way, there are three kinds of infidelity. There's type 1, which is a happenstance. There's type 2, which is an actual started with an emotional affair and that led into a physical relationship. And then there's a type 3, which is maybe a sex addiction. It's a different problem with the individual. So there has to be an assessment piece about which type of infidelity are we even dealing with. So this presumes it's type 2, where this person, I'm going to consider it the male, who fell into infidelity, and then the intensity of it followed this blue line. And right here in the middle, we'll say that the affair was found out. Now, the realistic expectation is that this man has had this entire time to process what was happening. And there needs to be a realistic expectation that the duplicate timeline of when the wife finds out, she's going to need that same amount of time to process how we got here, because this amount of time, it's only fair to give this amount of time in return. And so this whole space right here is what Dave Carter would call a no mistake zone, as in, we covered this in the last video about forgiveness is given, but trust is earned. To the degree that I forgive, then I can begin to respect. And to the degree that I begin to respect, then I can trust. And to the degree that I trust, then I can love. And that is a process. And I want to walk you through a little bit of that process here in my remaining slides. And so first we have to identify what are the differences between hurt and harm, because this is a severely harmful behavior that we are talking about. And God does not allow sin, and neither should you. Meaning, we are commanded to keep our hearts clean for any weight and debris that so easily ensnares us. So when I'm being responsible for myself, I have to forgive. And we covered that in an earlier video as well. But God doesn't command us to be harmed. That is a liberty that a mature Christian who has a deep, intimate relationship with the Lord knows how much he gave up for him or her. And that is a reasonable service and offering to give their life back to Christ. And so the definition of harm here is harm occurs when we emotionally and spiritually wound another in order to prevent feeling the pain in our own heart. It is most often exhibited when we cross the boundaries of another without genuine regard, concern, and care and love for that person. That's the key discernment without love, regard, and concern. But hurt is the emotional and spiritual experience that tells us we are feeling emotional and spiritual pain. In healthy relationships, there is a willingness to allow someone to feel their own pain because we have genuine regard, concern, and love for that person. And so most people are managing their life, they're surviving, and they're not even aware of when they're being hurt. And that's a big problem, because then you'll be boundary violated over and over again. You won't be able to recognize when you are being harmed. So this is a big deal. And it's hard to discern that if I've got a history with a person where I have been harmed. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about what's called mirror neurons, because I'm going to say again, the wife is the one that's been cheated on. She needs to know that he gets it, but then she needs to know that he gets it. And that 18 inches is the hardest journey. And so she is wise to, she's commanded by the Lord to forgive if she's a Christian, but um, but to build trust and build intimacy, that is a process, because all of the commands and commitments have been fractured and ruptured. And so empathy is a process. And scientists discovered what's called mirror neurons, where um, mirror neurons respond to your actions, the same actions as another. Some scientists believe that they are why we can understand other people's behaviors. So there's this story, and the version I heard was about a lab technician testing monkeys. And so this monkey had the electrodes on his brain, and the lab technician is watching the monitors, but the lab technician is on a break, and the lab technician is eating his ice cream on break, and then sees on the monitor that the monkey's pleasure region is firing. And that's peculiar, because we're not even doing the experiment. And looks over and sees the monkey watching him enjoy his ice cream. That's how mirror neurons were discovered. And so mirror neuron is the way God made us, that I can empathize with another person, because when I have my own consciousness of how I feel, then I can empathize of, oh, I bet you feel this. And so that's where we come to this diagram, that all of us have an amount of toxic shame. And this sanctification process is to take us back to our healthy shame, where we recover our relationship with ourselves. These are symptoms that will be exhibited when I have toxic shame, but these are symptoms of healthy shame, what author Chip Dodd calls the original in the garden feeling. And so listen to this. Healthy shame is, I'm not God, neither are you. I don't have all the answers, neither do you. Now, I do have some answers, and you have some, which means that I can help you with the answers I have, and you can help me with the answers you have. That's the real origin synergy. Number 3, I make mistakes, so do you. And number 4, I need you, and you need me. And so that is a place of constant reminder, because most of us who live in a toxic shame state, practicing some form of hopelessness, are unknowingly doing that. And we keep forgetting that we are God, because that we are not God, because we're under some delusion of power or illusion of control that we don't actually have, since we're human. And so here's the process of that empathy, where someone examines themselves and then they develop this consciousness of self. I'm aware of my own feelings, plus healthy shame. That brings me to a conscience of others, plus healthy shame. That's what equals empathy. And empathy is supposed to be the fuel that drives ministry. And so it is a wise statement to say, examine your leader, your pastor, your counselor, your um, friend's heart. We are supposed to examine others and examine their fruit for the purpose of reconciliation and inclusion. That's called by the Spirit. But in the flesh, our flesh is busy surviving. And from a place of fear and reactivity, I'm going to judge others not out of curiosity of what they're feeling, but out of a reaction of, I want to be safe. And if I could judge you, then I can keep you away from me and consequently protect myself. But notice, I am not leaning on God when I do that. That's what I mean about the illusion of power or the illusion of control. So I hope this blessed you, and I hope I'm under my time. So I look forward to seeing you in the next video. God bless.